All right, well, it is right at 11:30, and we know that we are the last session that stands between you and a lunch break. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully everyone, can we all see the screen? Is that good?
Okay. Yes.
Excellent. All right, and we are going to provide you with just a brief tour, okay? So we're not going to be able to go like super in depth. For any program leads, we are going to go over an in-depth meeting on our SIG, on our school implementation guide for Read by Grade 3. So this is sort of just a high-level overview for you.
All right, well, thanks so much for joining us today. We're really happy that you're here. We're excited to see you. So we'll take just a second here and introduce ourselves. My name is Joan Jackson. I am the most recent re-addition to the Read by Grade 3 team. If you've been working with Read by Grade 3 for any length of time, you'll remember that I was here a few years ago before I transitioned to Michigan Department of Ed, and now I've returned back to the great state of Nevada to continue serving here. And then I will let Mandy introduce herself.
And hi, I'm Mandy Latham, and I have the privilege of working with Joan Jackson here in Southern Nevada. We would like to excuse our colleague, Dr. Kevin Marie Laxalt, who's based out of Northern Nevada. She just was unable to make it today. But I know that her heart is with us in this work. And as we present this material, know that she was definitely heavily involved in all of this work that we are about to present for you today.
Yes, an integral part. All right, so let's take a look at the agenda. You'll see that we are going to do an overview of what we call the SIG 3, so the school implementation guide, and we're going to just briefly touch on each one of these components. When we get to the end of sharing our information, we'll take a look at any questions that have come up in the chat, and we will do a little question answering before we close out. So thanks so much, everyone, for being here today. We're excited to be able to share this information with you. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, we're going to start with a little true and false pop quiz. So get your thinking caps on and get ready to drop your answer in the chat. It'll either be true or false. So let's see what we get here. Question number 1. Nevada's Read by Grade 3 program is based on law. Is that true or false? I see true, true, true. Lots of true, 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 true. You're absolutely right. It is true. We have AB 289 and AB 400, and they are the laws on which our Read by Grade 3 program is based. Question 2, Nevada's Read by Grade 3 law applies only to students in kindergarten through 3rd grade. Is that true or false? I see lots of false, 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 false. You're absolutely right. It is false. Read by Grade 3 law incorporates all grades K through 5. Question number 3. Every public elementary school site administrator in Nevada is required to designate a Read by Grade 3 literacy specialist. True or false? Lots of trues. You're right on the money. It is absolutely true. Question 4, the NWA MAP Growth Reading Assessment measures student proficiency in reading. Is that true or false? I see some hesitation in the chat this time. This question, the answer to this is actually false. The NWA MAP Growth Reading Assessment measures student growth. Tika's right on the money. Yep, it measures growth, not proficiency. Good job. Question 5. Read by Grade 3 intervention services and intensive instruction for identified students are required to be implemented on a weekly basis. Is that true or false? This one is actually false. The trigger in there is weekly. It's actually should be on a daily basis. Question 6. The individual student literacy plan for each identified read by grade student must be approved by the principal and the parent or legal guardian of the student. Yes, you're right. Intensive instruction and intervention is daily. Yep. So question 6, what do you think? True or false? Does the individual student literacy plan have to be approved by the principal and the parent? Actually, the answer to this question is true. Parents are a required participant in the development and approval of their students' literacy plans. So we need to make every effort to engage our parents in developing those plans so they have an understanding of what extra assistance their students will be receiving. And the last question, question 7, state regulations include 3 specific components of read by grade 3 training requirements for both the roles of literacy specialist and classroom teacher. Do the regulations include 3 specific components of training requirements? Is that true? I see some answers in the chat. The answer to this one is false. It actually includes 9 specific components of read by grade 3 training for literacy specialists and classroom teachers. And we'll show you those as we go through the presentation. Great job. Thank you so much for participating in a pop quiz. You didn't know there would be one today. All right, so let's take a look. We're going to look at the overview of the SIG document. The purpose of this document is to serve as a guide for school districts and charter schools as you're working to implement read by grade 3. So it houses a wealth of information, including a history of the read by grade 3 law, which initiated in 2015, details about all of the requirements included in the law, and it informs you about your designated read by grade 3 point of contact. And I see in the chat you're asking for a link. We will be able to provide that for you after our session is concluded. So this is your key resource for all things read by grade 3. There are 9 programmatic requirements outlined in AB 289 and the most recently passed AB 400 for the implementation of Nevada's read by grade 3 program. You can see them here in this graphic, and they include requirements that are related to the local education agency literacy plans, literacy specialists, read by grade 3 designated assessments, parent notification, intervention services and intensive instruction, monitoring student growth, instructional options, professional learning, and LEA reporting. So what's key to remember here is that all of these 9 components come together for one main purpose, and that is to ensure that all of our elementary students across our great state are reading proficiently by the end of grade 3. So you heard me mention read by grade 3 point of contact, and that's new this year. So in an effort to provide a more customized level of support and technical assistance, our read by grade 3 team is implementing the point of contact structure for communication this year. So each district and charter school has been assigned a point of contact who will serve as your first line of communication with our team. It doesn't mean you'll only work with the person who's assigned to you. You'll still have access to the whole team, but that person will be your first line of contact so that you know who you can go to. The chart with this information is included in the SIG document, and we will be sharing that with local literacy leads as well. So you can see it's partially listed here, but we'll be making sure to share it in its entirety to everyone when we do our local literacy lead kickoff meeting. One critical requirement of the Read by Grade 3 law is the creation and submission of your local literacy plan. So you'll remember, or you may know, that the current iteration of this was a 2-year document. So it was drafted and submitted last year. And then it was to serve for last school years and then for this school year. So what we are going to do now that we're at the midpoint is our Read by Grade 3 team will be conducting reviews of those literacy plans and then providing feedback to each LEA. And then we'll be facilitating some conversations with your lit teams. So we'll be providing more information to our local literacy leads on what that midpoint review looks like and what the feedback document will look like when we get together for a more in-depth meeting. Okay, so now let's take a look at the requirements that are related to literacy specialists. So as we mentioned in the true and false chat, AB 289 requires that the principal of every public school designates a licensed teacher to serve in that role as literacy specialist. And the law provides these 5 qualifications to help guide that selection. So when you think about your position, if you are the literacy specialist at your school, or if you are a teacher and you're working with that person, here are the guidance that's been followed for selecting that individual, because they've shown success in promoting and improving the literacy of students. They are able to provide effective literacy instruction, and they have successfully administered the assessments, and they're able to provide support in that area. They are able to build relationships with teachers and administrators and parents, and they understand the importance of those. They're able to collaborate with your building leaders to design and implement professional learning related to the 5 essential components of literacy and delivering high quality tier 1 instruction, intensive instruction, and intervention. And they can help teachers and staff as they work to implement the intervention and intensive instruction for students who are working to attain and demonstrate grade level reading skills. So when you think about your literacy specialists, these are the criteria by which they were selected. There are 7 requirements that you can see here in relation to the duties and responsibilities of the literacy specialist. So when you think about the role that this person is playing in your building, they should be providing leadership in instruction, intervention, assessments, professional learning, and family engagement, all of those in relation to literacy. They should be helping teachers as they work to provide all of those services to their students who have been identified as deficient in reading. So when we get to the assessment piece, we'll look at how those students are identified as deficient in reading. And supporting teachers in establishing and maintaining progress monitoring for the students who have an individual learning plan. They are going to be collaborating with the principal to develop and implement required professional learning for teachers. And Mandy will tell you a little bit more about that as we go along. They provide training related to Read by Grade 3 assessments, help with data analysis, and then thought partners and helping with database decision-making for intensive instruction and intervention. And they provide support for families of students who have been identified as deficient in reading. All of those are outlined in AB 289. I mentioned about the assessment requirements that the literacy specialist helps with those Read by Grade 3 designated assessments. So the next couple of slides here are going to outline which assessments are designated for which grade. So on this slide, you can see for kindergarten, the expectation for fall is the Bergantz KEA, the Kindergarten Entry Assessment Screener. That's to be given within the first 45 days of school. Some districts did ask for a waiver, and they opted to use the MAP Growth Reading Assessment for that fall entrance exam. And so if your district is one of those, then know that it could have been either Bergantz or the MAP Growth. But for winter and spring, we anticipate that all kindergartners will participate in that MAP Growth Reading Assessment K2. So when you start to look at how students performed in kindergarten on the MAP growth reading assessment, we're looking at students who scored at or below the 40th percentile as students who may qualify for Read by Grade 3 services. Here is your chart for grades 1 through 3. You'll notice that the expectation is for them to participate in the MAP growth reading assessment fall, winter, and spring. Grade 1 should be completing the K2 assessment, and grades 2 and 3 should be participating in the MAP growth grades 2 through 5 reading assessment. And then that same benchmark holds, right? So if they're scoring at or below the 40th percentile, that's your indicator for students who are qualifying for Read by Grade 3 services for intensive intervention or intensive instruction and intervention. And then the next slide is going to outline for you for 3rd through 5th grade. So 3rd through 5th graders are going to participate in the Smarter Balanced Assessment for English Language Arts. They're going to do that in the spring. Grades 4 and 5, the indicator for continuing services for those students who are qualifying for Read by Grade 3 services is a level 1 or a level 2 on the Smarter Balanced Assessment in conjunction with teacher observation. All right, and then the next piece that we'll take a look at is parent notification. We are required to incorporate our families as partners in their students' learning. We need to ensure that they're being informed of what's happening with their student, that their student's been identified, and what supports are being provided for them. So you can see in the blocks here, we need to identify the programs and services that their student will be receiving, explain that if they don't demonstrate proficiency by the end of 3rd grade, that they don't just, the support doesn't stop there, that intervention and intensive instruction continues in grades 4 and 5, depending on how they score on that Smarter Balanced Assessment and what teachers are seeing in the classroom. We describe strategies for the families on how they can help at home. It's a key component, right? Parents want to know, families want to know how to help their students. So we want to describe those. We want to explain that the Smarter Balance is not the only factor that determines whether or not students are receiving intervention and intensive instruction. We want to make sure that we're describing the policies about what intervention and intensive instruction looks like. So how often does it happen? How's it being provided? Where will they be receiving those services? Provide information about English language development for our English language learners. Make sure we're providing strategies targeted for English language development for our EL students. We want to provide resources in families' home language if possible. So if we have translation services, we want to make sure we have that available. Explain the progress monitoring component. So help parents understand that the student has a plan, and then we're going to periodically check and see how the student is doing in response to that, and that the services and programs will be adjusted to meet student needs as they go through. All right, and now I will pass to Mandy.
Well, and thank you so much, Joan. And really, remember the Read by Grade 3 law, the intent is to identify these students, to provide a myriad of services and supports on multiple fronts, and making sure that the communication piece is there, bringing in the family, bringing in the administration, bringing in the classroom teacher. Like, we're all a team working together to provide supports for these students who are at risk. And so when we look at it, it's kind of like a cupcake, right? You know, we have our tier 1 instruction, and then we add like tier 2, tier 3 through intensive intervention and instruction. But then we also have like additional instructional options. So these instructional options, so a school needs to provide at least one of the 3. So depending on your LEA can offer all 3. They can offer 2 of the 3. They can offer 1 of the 3. So, and this is in addition to intervention services being provided at the school site. So, excuse me, either supplemental tutoring, a plan for reading with the pupil at the home, and participation in any parent literacy workshops, a mentor or a tutor who has received specialized training in teaching students how to read. So again, one of those three options is going to be provided to the family, to the parent or legal guardian. And then we also need to try, whenever it's possible, to explain these options to the parents in their home language. But we know that some languages are a little bit easier to do that than others. So it's just, the law says to the extent possible. And then this is really just an overview of the intervention services and intensive instruction. So like, here's kind of the scope. So there's specific literacy monitoring systems are put into place by the school. So your school might either have adopted certain programs or certain progress monitors. And sometimes they're school-wide, sometimes they're grade level specific. There's the individual student learning plans that are going to be created to really target and hone in on what that particular student needs. Identified students are provided read by grade 3 literacy services as long as necessary across K-5. And even though the law stops at, grade 5, I mean, that's going to impact those students as they move into middle school and high school. And then student retention. So student retention right now, the law says that they may be retained. We know that with the passage of AB 400 in 2023, so retention, they will be retained, but that is not actually going to become enacted or begin until 2028. So that gives schools, educators, communities, time to build that runway before that actually is going to be put into place, right? So it gives us time to look at those instructional practices and really get gear in. So when we're thinking about that, that's going to really impact those kids that are in pre-K this year. And that's also assuming that the law doesn't change in the next legislative session, but we don't know. So we only have to present on like what is factual for this moment in time, but just know, because there's some misconceptions about retention. So it's not necessarily going to be coming back or implemented fully until 2028. And then of course, providing intervention services and intensive instruction. And then that those services have to be provided by a licensed teacher. Because, we have a lot of people coming into the school building, but we want to make sure that it's someone who's really grounded in pedagogy, who knows literacy, who's able to provide those effective services. And then how do the daily intervention services and intensive instruction actually play out in the school setting? So what does that look like? So here are the different components. So reading instruction is required to occur 90 minutes each day at school. And again, your schools, your LEAs might develop policies around that, like how much is devoted to like tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3. What does that look like? Are you going to do more than the 90 minutes? But 90 minutes is the minimum requirement. Instruction is provided in small groups. So again, we're talking about those intensive instruction or intervention services. Your school might offer instruction in classes with reduced pupil teacher ratios. So I know some schools, they do something like a power hour where students are divided out, and those who are at the most risk are in a room with like a lower number of students with a teacher who provides instructional supports. A timeline has been established for frequently monitoring student progress. So, again, this is going to come back to like your school or your district policies. How often is the progress monitoring occurring? There should be some kind of plan in place. Tutoring and mentoring are offered. Classes are designed to increase students' ability to transition from grade 3 to grade 4 and beyond. So, again, this is really going to impact that third grade year, where you're really going to want to make sure that's really our goal, is to have every student's reading by grade 3. And then programs to improve student proficiency in reading are offered during the summer. And then here's the caveat: any combination of the 7 provisions noted here. So if you're looking at this list and you're like, well, my school doesn't offer this, but it offers this, or my school doesn't offer this, but it offers, so again, there's that little bit, I would say, leeway in the law with these provisions because of this, any combination of the 7 provisions noted here. So what are the provisions for reading instruction for students identified by Read by Grade 3? So a description of the programs and services provided must be included in your local literacy plan. So if you're a classroom teacher and you're saying, what is the local literacy plan? Your district, your LEA, your charter organization has created a literacy plan, which they submitted to the state, and they should have a copy for their own records that they plan to implement, where it's going to outline what that looks like. Reading instruction must include regularly scheduled reading sessions and small groups. So I saw in the chat, someone said, well, we don't do small groups necessarily every day. Remember, you're going to be doing reading instruction every day. You're going to be doing intensive reading instruction every day, but that small group or the tier 3, that may or may not happen on an everyday basis. That's going to really depend, going back to that bullet point 1. And then specific instruction targets reading deficiencies in the following areas. So the law is very specific here. Phonological and phonemic awareness, decoding skills, reading fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension strategies. So when you think about students who are struggling with reading proficiency, chances are they're struggling in at least one of these areas, sometimes multiple areas. And then, of course, once those students have been identified, we need to create a plan, right, to put in place, so that way the parents are informed, the principal's informed, the teacher's informed, everyone knows what is the plan, what is our game plan for this student. So by law, the 3 components of this plan are a description of any intervention services and intensive instruction that will be provided to the student. So we need to describe what it is that we're doing. A statement that the student will receive these services for as long as necessary. So, at the end of the school year, if they're still not proficient, we don't exit them out. Those services are going to continue into the next year, or until the student is reading at grade level. And then a listing of the programs and services provided and how the progress will be measured regularly. So those are the 3 requirements by law. Now, based on your local LEA policies, your district policies, or your charter school organization policies, they may have some additional requirements that they add into those plans, or additional information that they feel is important to be included in the plan. But as far as the law goes, these are the 3 requirements for the student plan. And then, just like Joan said, there are some professional learning requirements. So these are the requirements for the literacy specialist. And the ones that are sort of this white color or lighter color actually overlap with the professional learning required for teachers. Those are one and the same. So professional learning on the standards, professional learning on the current Nevada State Literacy Plan, and the district or charter local literacy plan. Evidence-based resources and methods for literacy instruction and intervention, methods for screening for intervention concerning dyslexia and other reading disabilities, using the assessments approved by the state board, now in regulation, methods for using diagnostic and progress monitoring assessments. So those 6 overlap between the literacy specialists, sometimes they're called literacy strategists or instructional coaches, but who's ever been identified as your Read by Grade 3 literacy specialist will receive training in that, as well as the classroom teachers. And also evidence-based resources and methods for literacy instruction and interventions for our English learners. The 2 that are different, that only apply to the literacy specialists, are guiding teachers in data analysis and database decision-making to inform instruction. Because they're going to work with teachers and helping make those decisions. So they need professional learning on how actually to do that. And then also national standards for coaching teachers in literacy instruction, including delivering and receiving feedback. So if we have a literacy specialist who is coaching a teacher, we want them to have professional learning on actually how to coach, right? And what those standards are for coaching and how to give feedback, how to receive feedback, right? Because that's an important part of the learning process. And then for teachers, this slide shows the professional learning requirements for teachers. So the 7 are all the same as the literacy specialists, but the ones that's different is application of data analysis and database decision-making strategies to inform instruction. So how do they apply that knowledge to their classroom teaching? And then collaborative practices that focus on pupil learning by effectively participating in professional learning or coaching. So that could be a myriad of things. PLCs might qualify for that. Anything that you're doing that where you are like collaborating together, work groups, think groups, grade level professional learning. Your school, your LEA, your charter organization, your charter school site will determine what that looks like. But you can see there's a lot of overlap between the training and the professional learning. And then next, there are reporting requirements. And so for Read by Grade 3, we have 1 reporting requirement for this year. And that is a report that's due on October 15th. And so we send it out. We actually collect this report, and it's basically the number and percentage of students at each public elementary school within the school district who are in grade 3 and designated to receive intervention services and intensive instruction while enrolled. And including whether or not such pupils were previously provided intervention services and intensive instruction. So there's like 2 components to that report. That is not going to be submitted by the classroom teacher. That will be submitted by your district or by whoever sees like your data if you're a classroom teacher, but know that that is the report. However, AB 400 that was recently passed in the 2023 legislative session it didn't create, but the Nevada Commission on School Funding was given some expressed reporting requirements. So they are meeting, they've been given in the law, it outlines very specific reporting requirements. And even though it impacts Read by Grade 3 and does include Read by Grade 3 data, it's a separate entity. It goes to the commission and not necessarily to the Read by Grade 3 team. So all of the protocols for submission of these reports, including like deadlines, what does the reporting look like? That's all going to be coming from the commission, not necessarily from our NDE Read by Grade 3 team. So some of the duties that the commission will be enacting, and again, they met for the first time a few weeks ago. So we're going to get more information as these decisions have been made. So on this slide, it outlines all of the metrics. So use metrics to measure the literacy rate for pupils in 1st, 3rd, and 5th grade, use metrics to measure the performance of pupils on standardized examinations in math, reading, and science, identify the progress made by each school, school district, and charter school in improving the literacy of pupils enrolled in the elementary school, review the academic progress made by pupils in each public school since the implementation of the pupil-centered funding plan, use metrics to measure the number of pupils in elementary school who were promoted to the next grade after testing below proficient in reading in the immediately preceding school year, separated by grade level and by level of performance on the relevant test. Use metrics to measure the number of schools that employ a licensed teacher designated to serve as a literacy specialist, and the number of schools that fail to employ and designate such a licensed teacher. And then review the academic progress of such pupils as the result of any additional money provided to each school by the pupil-centered funding plan. So there's a lot to these reporting requirements. I'm sure there's a lot of questions about this. And what I can tell you is that it's going to come from the commission, what that looks like when it's due, how often. So they're meeting right now to discuss. Those meetings can be found if you do a Google search, Commission on Nevada School Funding. You can find out if you're interested in being informed in the meetings. They have to follow open meeting laws. They have to, you can attend them, or you can stream them, or you can go back and watch them after the fact. So if you want more information about that, that is something that you could potentially do. And so again, this just kind of goes over the report again. So each school district and each charter school shall submit a quarterly report to the commission. Again, when is that going to begin? They're just having some of these conversations on what that might look like. Obviously, they're going to have to give time for these reports to be put into place. You can't just say, I need a report tomorrow. The commission shall review the reports submitted. And then once they have that information, they can make recommendations, commentary, anything related to the reports to the governor, the director of the Legislative Council Bureau, the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Education, and Interim Finance Committee. So they just want to see, based on that information that they're gathering, they're going to make recommendations to the governor and to some of these other committees on what are some other steps. Okay, so I know that was a lot, very heavy. The law is very dense. There's a lot of components and pieces, and I know that we've kind of glossed over. I mean, any one of those specific programmatic requirements, we could have probably spent a whole session just providing professional learning. So we know that this was kind of a fast and furious overview of the law, but we do want to take a moment. And if there's anyone that has any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat, or we're a little bit smaller group. So if you're brave enough and you want to come off mute, feel free to come off mute and ask your question.
While you're thinking, we can share with you that we do have I'll do a commercial for our upcoming literacy summit. So on November 4th, here in Las Vegas at Harrah's, we will be having our 5th annual Nevada's Read by Grade 3 Literacy Summit. It will be in person this year. So if you don't have the registration link for that, please let us know, and we'll make sure that we get that out to your literacy lead so that we can share that far and wide. We're excited about being in person this year. We have some really wonderful presenters engaged for us. So it's Saturday, November 4th, and it'll be at Harrah's. We will definitely share that, Tika. All right, so let me drop in the chat the session evaluation form so that I can find that registration link. We'll get that out.
Yeah, so Joan will drop in the attendance link and the session survey. Please know that we are, again, like this law is very dense. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces that are working in tandem. That AB 400, there's some new components with that additional reporting requirements for LEA. Like, we are here to be your partner. We are here to be your support. We are here to walk you through step by step, so that way it's not as overwhelming, it's not as stressful, because at the end of the day, we're here for our students, and we're here to provide support for you, whether you are a classroom educator, whether you are a principal, whether you are a program lead. I had a parent reach out to me the other day with some concerns, and I was able to address the concerns that the parent had. I mean, we really want to walk with you in this journey on providing supports for our students, and we're here to help you in any way. And with that, we'll just end with a quick quote while you're looking at some of those attendance documents and forms. Reading is important, because if you can read, you can learn about anything, about everything, and everything about anything. So really, like, that's the whole point, right? It's the gateway to all learning almost. And we really, I know everyone has like the best intentions for our students, and we want our students to have those opportunities, and we want to open the door for them to the wondrous worlds and every single opportunity that they have. And so really, that's what Read by Grade 3 is about. It's about providing support to students in a systematic way that is the same for everyone, whether you're in Washoe County, whether you're in Clark County, whether you're at a charter school. And so we really appreciate the work that you do. We know that how hard it is. We know that there's a lot of challenges, and we are here to help you. Again, here's our contact information. Feel free to reach out. Again, if you have any questions, we'll stay on for a couple more minutes. But if not, enjoy your lunch. Feel free to come back. Just so you know, this afternoon I will be presenting with a different colleague on dyslexia. So if you have some interest in that, please join my session this afternoon.
And please remember that lunch runs until 1 o'clock. So session 4 will start right at 1 o'clock. Thank you for joining.